specifically about torture. A short notice about the Turkey Tribunal. It's an initiative that we took after having quite a lot of individual complaints and procedures going on. And we went actually to a more structural initiative to create this tribunal where we will have 5 reports. It's a people's tribunal, of course, 5 reports: torture, impunity, abduction, freedom of the press. We plan to have a report on medical aid. However, this is not so sure anymore. Some people who are working together with us, there's really a problem with the Turkish government, actually. And perhaps it will be exchanged for a legal report on the independence of the judiciary and access to justice. It was planned to have the tribunal in September. For obvious reasons due to Corona, that was not possible. We're planning now, most probably in the last part of April, hoping that at that moment the situation will be better. Vaccines hopefully will have been in the market, and we hope we then can organize it physically. Just for today, also mentioning that here it is on a YouTube live broadcasting, not only on the webinar, and also the YouTube channel of Turkey Tribunal gives this. I'm a bit handicapped because I cannot see your reactions for the moment. That's a bit nasty, but we will try to manage that. The people who are working with us can send me emails, so with my email I will see what people are asking of questions. About torture, that was the first report that we could produce. Torture is not something new in Turkey. It's a long-lasting virus or disease, I can say. And it's a bit like a virus. It's so incorporated in the mentality and the structure of the security service and the political system of Turkey that each time something happens, or each time there is a little bit less control on the facts, it comes again at the speed and at a level that is really deplorable. We, in our report, made a little bit of history from the 80s on, where we see that some groups are specifically targeted, all people with linked or not with Turkish organizations, autonomy organizations, left organizations, opposers, but also simply independent people and critical people have had the same kind of treatment, if I can say so. And the last years, of course, we have also the people who are supposedly linked to the Gül movement, who have become target of this torture. It is a really widespread system, and the most, let's say, the most appealing thing about that, it's hard to say, it's not the fact it happens, because in each country with some police traditions it can happen, but the fact it is never prosecuted in a real way, the impunity is very high. We have been examining with official documents and official statistics as good as possible, because of course the dark number here is very high. But we think that there are about 3,000 complaints a year. That's something that we think we can say, with the result that at the most, and most probably we are too cautious and we are too positive, that at the most 1% of the allegations lead to a real judgment of imprisonment, which is the normal and only one sentence that you can get for such a gross violation of human rights. So 1%, and even that most probably is largely too high. This is not something, torture, as we examine it, is not something that is coming spontaneous as something that is present in the police services, security services. No, it is something that's clearly organized. They have special teams coming to help if needed, to do it in a, between brackets, I'm sorry to say, professional way, in a hard way. So it's clearly from the different witnesses, from the different reports, it's something that is organized and also tolerated. You can organize but also tolerate it, meaning there is no structural going against this. That's very clear. And we're clear also that we have not found or seen the, let's say, the written instructions to do it. But you can, so the direct responsibility of the governmental level, you cannot show it by an instruction to do it. That would be quite silly to say. Government, meanwhile, is denying it simply. But it is clear from the fact impunity is so much organized, the lack of interventions of the different governmental levels, and we can go on, that there is a clear indirect responsibility, indirect meaning, not that it is less responsible, but it means by tolerating it, by verbally supporting it even, that it is a license to torture that is given by the highest authorities. Also the fact that European court decisions are not followed, that they always have an excuse about it, there's no medical proof and so on. Of course, all these things are in a way that we can clearly say, yes, the central government is responsible.
Hayır, yine teknik sorun var.
Excuse me? Okay, I heard something and we'll go on. So, this is our report. You can find the report on the website of Turkey Tribunal. We are having this on YouTube also, and we have 3 participants of our 3 panel members. The first one is Ezat Mossallenejad. Ezat is a leading figure in the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture. He is based in Toronto, and he will give us information about, yes, there is Turkish translation available. Someone...
No, I am afraid Turkish interpretation is not working for the moment. I really need you to give you a break so I can repair this technical problem. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand. So
I actually seem to be on the wrong channel. I'm on the panelist channel and not on the interpreter's channel. That's why I'm intervening in your speech. I'm very sorry.
Okay, can you organize it, Ash? I will stop for 3 minutes. Is that okay? And then we go on. So for everyone who's listening, we are trying to fix the Turkish translation because there was a problem. The translation was on my channel.
Sorun vardı, bir Türkçe tercümede bir şey vardı. Who can hear me now? Who can hear me at this moment? Testing? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh no, that's not good. Okay.
Yeah, that's not good yet.
Just a minute. Okay, can you hear me now? Testing?
Yes, I still hear you.
Okay. I really need Ash to put me on the interpreter's channel, so I'm logging out.
Channel because the interpreter was on my channel. And
please go ahead, Johan, because this will take a little bit of time.
Okay, go ahead. So I would like to give the floor now to Ezat Mossallenejad. As I said, he's a senior and member of the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture, who is located in Toronto. And Ezat will give us information and share his experience with torture victims coming from Turkey, and also try to make some resemblances, difference, we will hear, between Turkey and other countries with let's say, systematic torture practices. So as if you can take the floor now, you have it, and we have around 15 minutes, we're a bit behind schedule due to some technical problems, but take your time. You have around 15 minutes, if that works, and go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I wear 2 hats at the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture. I work as a trauma and settlement counselor, simultaneously as a policy analyst and researcher. I'm a frontline worker, seeing clients on an ongoing The torture was established in 1977. Since then, we have served more than 40,000 survivors of torture from 140 countries. There are 2 methods of serving survivors of torture. One is clinical method. Send them to a physical practitioner, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and they try to heal the after effects of torture, whether physical or psychological. But this method is definitely necessary, but not adequate, because a survivor of torture, when leaves home, anything can act as a trigger to return her or him to torture. That is why we developed holistic method. We not only provided with services clinically, we also extend our all-embracing settlement and integration services. So, serving clients from Turkey started actually in 1980. I have recourse that after the coup d'etat of 1980, some Turkish people escaped Turkey to Canada and were provided by our services. There is one general observation. Whenever there was a coup or attempted coup or massive repression in Turkey, the level of torture went up. And this is almost a rule. I can give you some statistics. The latest statistic I have belongs to the fiscal year 1917 and 1918. 2017 and 2018. In this year, we served 52 clients from Turkey, 29 men, 16 women, and the rest youth and children. Now I want to share you about first targets in Turkey, then we come to techniques of torture, and then the after effects of torture, and also I share with you some of the letters and interventions we have had so far about Turkey, either to the Turkish government or to the United Nations or to some regional agencies. I will end up with a conclusion about Turkey. First of all, I come to targets. Anybody can be a target in Turkey if that person is suspected of doing activities against the government. So, mainly the targets are Kurdish activists, specifically those who are suspected of collaboration with PKK, Alevi, people of Alevi faith, So it is my understanding that Alevis are the largest minority in Turkey, and they constitute almost 11% of the population, and they have been going through harassment for years, and they have come to us asking for services. And anybody who has been helping Kurdish people, whether educational or human rights training or advocacy, they are targets of the government, and they have gone through torture and they have come to us. Another category of people are members of LGBTQ community. It is a little bit tricky because, as we know, there is no anti-LGBTQ legislation in Turkey, but police is highly homophobic, and they use other excuses to harass them and torture them. Also, members of LGBTQ community are tortured by the community who are provoked against them, and sometimes by family members. Another category of people are those who work for freedom of conscience and freedom of assembly and freedom of religion. Among my clients, I had a Jewish activist and a person who was suspected of conversion. Again, they use other excuses to torture them. In most of the cases, there is no habeas corpus, and they keep prisoners in limbo. I had also one university professor who was detained, tortured, because of supporting academic freedom and due to his writing. I come to techniques of torture. First of all, let me tell you that they can use any technique, and at any moment, depending on the weakness of their subjects, and also in different countries they use something that is native and people are sensitive to that. Turkish police was notorious for years for using falake or bastinado. But nowadays, whatever we have documented, the technique of torture is in Turkey is similar to other countries. Flogging, beating, hanging, all other physical torture, like preventing this victim from having water, having food, sleeping, and also I'm very upset to tell you that rape has been also used occasionally, not systematically, as a technique of torture. But threat to rape is rampant, so in Turkey, based on the testimony of our clients. Also, we had reports about mutilation and burning and sexual abuses. Physical torture is always combined with psychological torture, that I can tell you some of the psychological tortures. We call this psychological torture based on the Article 16 of the Convention Against Torture. Other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. These include first, constant harassment, threats, we kill you, we kill your family members, we rape you, we rape your family members. And also forcing the prisoner to witness other people being tortured. In one case, a client told me that he was detained in a toilet for 3 days with bad smell coming, and he was still, after many years, he feels bad smell. Also, in a PKK, a client who was a member of PKK told me that he was tortured both by PKK forces and by the government as well. Another technique of psychological torture is humiliation and degrading treatment or punishment. Also, we had a report about firing people from their job after getting released from detention. Clients have reported to us. These are some of the techniques used by Turkish police and security forces. What I can tell you here, the difference between torture in Turkey and other countries. So far, we have not had any report about religiously consecrated tortures in Turkey. And also, so far among our clients, no one has testified about being tortured by military officers. Torture is being perpetrated by security officers and also by police. Now I come to after effects of torture. Torture and the trauma resulted from torture does not go away. It will remain for the rest of one's life. And it becomes a part of the psychology of the survivor. We have some people who have done very well vis-a-vis the experience of torture, converting their trauma into something constructive. We have also people who have become paranoid due to torture. All we can do is to stabilize their condition. In between, almost 90% of survivors need help at different levels. Most of them suffer from what we call it post-traumatic stress disorder. There are three categories of symptoms for post-traumatic stress disorder. One is avoidance. Sometimes they avoid people, they avoid places, they avoid everything or everywhere that reminds them of the torture. They avoid police officers on the road. They even avoid people in uniform. Sometimes they avoid their family members. And they have a tendency to remain in loneliness. And another symptom is intrusion. Sometimes something intrudes in your life. It becomes you paralyzed. You feel that everything that happened to you is coming back to you, not in dream, but while you are awake. So, and as if you are in a movie. We call it flashbacks. And people who go through flashback may lose their connection with the outside world, becoming disassociated. There are hyperarousal also, the third symptom. So bad dreams, lack of concentration, forgetfulness, amnesia, and difficulty sleeping. We call it insomnia. Most of our clients from Turkey, they suffer from insomnia. And there are other symptoms also. The PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, could lead to depression. You don't know who you are, where you are, what you want. You have no incentive. You have no passion for life. You don't go out. You don't join the mainstream of life. So, if I tell you that there is a panacea or there is a magic formula for healing survivors of torture, don't believe me. There is not such a magic formula. All we do, we use our holistic method, we use the help of the community like yourself, and we try to promote coping capacity of our clients. So we try our best to make them agents of their healing. One thing that I want to tell you, and I'm very happy about that, is the tremendous faculty of resilience by our Turkish clients. They have done very well. They respond to our rehabilitation services. So some of them have fully integrated into the Canadian society. So they came to Canada without knowledge of the languages, neither French nor English, though they speak fluently. They have joined universities, they are engineers, business people, and especially women. They have joined social work and even medical and legal network. We are very happy about the power of the resiliency of our client. And one thing also, last thing I want to share with you is some other areas of crimes that are similar to torture, or some lack of attention by the Turkish government. We have written many times to the government of Turkey. In one case, I attended a meeting in Vienna, meeting of the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. We consider Turkey a European country, and I spoke about Turkey not paying attention to the Geneva Convention relating to the status of refugees, because Turkey has put reservation on acceptance of refugees. Only the Geneva Convention is applied to Europe, people of Europe coming from Europe, and not to others. It is a lack of refugee protection. And unfortunately, Turkey has sent some people back to torture against Article 3 of the UN Convention against torture and against Article 33 of Geneva Convention. And also recently, Turkey has continued with more and more military policy in the region, and you know about that. I don't elaborate on this issue. But the last thing I want to tell you is my optimism about Turkey. Turkey is a civil society. Turkey has a deep-rooted tradition of secularism. separation of religion from the government. Turkey has contributed to the world's art and literature. We have great Turkish writers like Nazım Hikmet, who said, everywhere, so if there is a depressed person, everywhere when there is a lack of freedom, I feel pain. And my heart is being shot every morning in Greece. So many good things. We have also writers like Ezat, Orhan Kemal, Yaşar Kemal, and many others writers, and especially the Greek Nobel Prize laureate in literature. We know that sooner rather than later, Turkey will be back to its feet, and torture and other degrading treatment or punishment will be banished from Turkey. We have our faith on Turkey. We will continue at this Canadian Center for Victims of Torture to serve our Turkish clients. We love them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ezat, for this clear personal testimony about victims. We noticed the sad and immense and lasting impact torture has on the life quality of the victims, but also the resilience of a lot of people that try to fight back, even without forgetting or without having solved all their problems. But and also thank you for the work you do for these people. You emphasized that most of torture comes from police and security. That's also in the report that we have seen that it is for the moment the one who's most occurring. Actually, we have the most from police and security officers that it's coming, indeed. But I also noticed your optimism, which I hope will be real, and that we can come to a situation where human rights are respected. There came in some questions. Not all questions will be answered immediately, but two questions I would like to answer. Someone is asking, what can the European Union do about these things? Well, I think that helping the victims is one thing that should be done more outside of Europe, and is not really structurally organized, but also the fact that Europe is working, the European Union, on the Magnitsky Act. And people know what the Magnitsky Act is. It's a possibility to sanction not only countries, but also institutions and persons in a country. And so the perpetrators of torture could be targeted by that, could help. And of course, the stronger position of the European Union towards Turkey is really needed and should be pushed harder than we ever did. There was a question of Seven Ellen, who said, Ezat did not mention member of Gülümul that started. Of course, they are also targeted, but I suppose that for the moment, not yet victims from that part came already to the center of Ezat. So, thank you, Ezat. We have a second contribution, and we have still some problems with the translation, but the next one is Erhan Dogan. Erhan Dogan is, and we will try to do that in each webinar, someone who is a victim himself, first-hand experience, if we can say that in a euphemistic, sadly way. And to help it to understand better, we will try to give him the floor also, but I'm not sure that our technique is allowing that for the moment. But we made a little movement about him and what he suffered, and I propose we will now look at that. It's a clear statement on what he was suffering. Yes.
Ankara'da görev 2 hafta sonra göründe polisler tarafından gözaltına alındı. Birkaç arkadaşla beraber iş yerindeydik. Aldıkları şiddet duymaya başladılar. Dövmeye başladılar. Sabah erken saatlerde şubelerinin polis merkezine götürdüler. Orada bir götürdüklerinde üzerimize ben ilk spor salonuna girdiğim andan itibaren spor salonunda insan vardı ve hepsinin üzerinde tur bulunuyordu. Duvar diplerine oturtulmuştu. Ve sonra bizim ellerimizle arkadan kelepçeleydik. Koydular. Daha sonra bir hafta da bize işkence başladılar. İşkence yapacakları insanları spor salonundan çıkarıp başka bir alana götürüp orada işkence yapıyorlardı. Onlar vardı. Bir de gece saat 11-12 gibi gelip sabah 4-5 gibi işkenceler çok ağırdı. Yapılan işkencelere tahammülün çok zor olduğu bir intihar etmeyi düşündüm. 14-15 kişilik koğuşlardan imkanları alanlardı. Bütün imkanım olsa veya Türkiye'de yapılan şu anda bu zulümlerin ne kadar ağır olduğunu ve işkenceden insanların öldüğünün duyurulması işkenceyi yapmak
Okay, as you saw, it was a clear statement from Erhan, who suffered himself clearly from that situation shortly after the coup. We'll try to get him alive, but there is something wrong with his connection, so I will skip that. But first, we had a very important question. To say, if we look at this situation of torture and we say it is actually ordered, not tolerated, then we have some discussions possible, but it is systematic. It's not really linked to 15 July. 15 July coup is rather, let's say, an excuse and not to reason. Sometimes for Joyce it's clearly protected, and then the question is, does that not call for an intervention of, or justifies the intervention of another state of the Council of Europe? Because the European Convention on Human Rights on Article 33 says that any state can complain to the European Court. It happens not a lot of time, it is only sometimes actually. And would that not justify? I think I can clearly say, and we should I think in the tribunal or afterwards or another way really ask at least one European country to do that, because it's indeed clear we have here a gross violation of a member of the Council of Europe that is systematic. And I think indeed, to answer your question, that it would be appropriate for a state that is member of the Council of Europe, and says that the rule of law is important to indeed start such a procedure, which has a high symbolic value, of course, but also politically and legally is an important step. We have the good news that Erhan is indeed in our Zoom meeting now. So if Erhan is there, I would ask him to take the floor. I hope everything will be okay. So I will try. Erhan, if you're there, can you come into the meeting, please, for a short statement, if possible?
He's not here yet, Johan. So I'll let you know when he is.
He's not in yet. Okay, but then we go further with another contributor, Mushegh Yekmalyan. He is working in the World Organization Against Torture. That's the same organization with Eric Sotas, who was the co-author of our report on torture, was Secretary General of. And it's another, of course, another approach. With Ezat had the more personal experience with people that had survived happily enough, but still were suffering from this torture. Mushegh is more someone who's working in the World Organization Against Torture, is working with the United Nations, working with the Council of Europe Committee Against Torture, and he will share us his experiences on torture. So can I give the floor to Mushegh, please? Can you organize that? I suppose he's somewhere there.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks a lot, Johan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, welcome.
It was nice talking to you today also. Actually, yes, thank you for this opportunity, and I also welcome very much this tribunal initiative, very much needed and very timely, because the amount of torture and the nature of being systemic and systematic in Turkey is beyond any legitimate doubt. So that's the case, and I will try to go very quickly through my presentation and my intervention, and the full text I will communicate to you later. So I'll talk about the OMCT perspective on the practice and the impunity of torture in Turkey from standpoint of global anti-torture movement also. Fight against torture is a positive obligation of the state, is jus cogens, and not derogable right, and is a crime under international law. And the crime against humanity is widespread and systemic. The reality in the world is unfortunately very different. The OMCT's SOS Torture Network, with more than 200 member organizations worldwide, confirms the widespread practice of torture in many countries of the world, and as was already said, according to Amnesty International, during the last 5 years, in more than 140 countries, torture was exercised, and nearly half of the respondents of the questions related to torture and custody are sure that torture is happening in custody, and more than 80% of people want to have stronger laws and policies in place to prevent torture. However, 1/3 of the respondents also thinks that torture can be justified. That's the picture of our societies, unfortunately. As a rule, we know that a significant part of torture cases happens during the first 48 to 72 hours of the detention. In many cases, torture happens also before even the person is taken into custody. Police vehicles are very often used for these purposes. Reflecting on Turkey, historically, Turkey had a very difficult transition to democratization and respect for fundamental rights, and that transition has unfortunately reversed in many times, similar to what we see with the current political leadership. Torture was always a central issue, and especially within the closed institutions. Periodically, political instability was also part of the history of Turkey for several decades, and the military traditionally played a significant role in formation of state institutions. Hence the brutality of law enforcement and criminal justice systems after several coups d'etats that happened in the 20th century. In 1980s, torture was mostly used against the political opponents, Kurdish parties, leftist parties, and against some not yet fully formed civil society and few human rights lawyers and defenders. And this was reflected in the early reports of the Council of Europe Committee on Prevention of Torture reports. Significant reform effort with some reduction in torture came as part of the European integration process, which included rule of law reforms. The first decade of 2000s was time for great hopes, when in 2003 the policy of zero tolerance towards torture was declared. However, the last coup d'etat attempt in 2016 failed and triggered a counter-reaction, and torture became more brutal, indiscriminate, widespread in Turkey, especially against the army servicemen who were either part of the coup attempt or were suspected of supporting them. This has been characterized by a type of violations in response to the coup, but equally by the destruction of the protection system. A lot of judges were released from their positions, state officials, and their replacements often had no experience on work with torture prevention. But even before 2016, the military operations intensified in southeastern provinces of Turkey against Kurdish fighters in 2015, and entire residential districts became war zones, like Sur districts of Diyarbakir and many others. The armed conflict in Southeast is still ongoing, and the level of violence and repression is not subsiding, unfortunately. Many of the local NGOs monitor the cases of extrajudicial killings, abductions, and torture. Abductions in Turkey, and according to the Human Rights Association, the civilian death toll since 2015 is well beyond 3,000 people who are being killed, basically. And all this data is official, public, and is all uploaded on the website of the Human Rights Association. Despite the fact that thousands of torture cases are being documented in Turkey, the government denies the negative dynamics of rising numbers of such cases. The factual situation and the government assurances are again from two different realities, two different worlds. On one hand, the findings of UN Council of Europe CPT are reflected in their dozens of reports which highlight the patterns of systemic and systematic issues, even with numerical data on numbers of torture cases, and on the other hand, the denial of official Ankara on the existence of such problem, mainly calling it anti-propaganda against Turkey by its enemies. I will quickly go through findings of Council of Europe and UN, but will not reflect in depth because it's already reflected in an excellent manner in your own report. I will just go through the important safeguards against ill treatment that is reflected in the CPT report. The CPT reports that the frequency of allegations remains at a worrying level. In their response to the report of 2017 visit of CPT, the Turkish authorities indicated that since 2003, Turkey decisively implemented a zero-tolerance policy against torture and ill treatment. This position was also reiterated by the Minister of Interior. However, the reality on the ground proves to be completely opposite. One of the safeguards of notification of custody we have experienced also through our membership based on in Turkey, and also on CPT reports that the notifications are not respected in most of the cases, and in some instances the notifications and reasons of arrest was reportedly delayed by law enforcement officials and never even communicated. Or communicated to some of the lawyers at a very late stage. Access to a lawyer remains very problematic. The state must ensure that every person detained by law enforcement agencies effectively has the right to access to a lawyer as from the very outset of deprivation of liberty. We know that there are several articles in the Criminal Procedure Code, like the Article 154, and others that deprives for 24 hours the access to lawyer if a person is accused of issues related to national security, terrorism, organized drug trafficking, etc. One of the problematic aspects here is that many cases identified as national security related are against activists, human rights defenders, and are aimed at suppressing the dissent, human rights protection, and freedom of speech. As a result, the pressure is also mounting on lawyers who choose to defend this kind of cases. On the medical examination, in accordance with the Section 9 of the detention regulation, persons detained at law enforcement institutions have mandatory to undergo medical examination every 24 hours. However, mandatory medical controls remain something that are highly flawed and in many cases are absolutely not respected. As for the findings of the UN Office for High Commissioner for Human Rights and UN Special Rapporteur, the UNOHCHR in its reports from 2017 and 18 documented the use of different forms of torture and ill treatment in custody, including severe beatings, threats of sexual assault, and actual sexual assault, electric shocks, and waterboarding. Based on accounts collected by OHCHR, the acts of torture and ill treatment generally appeared to aim at extracting confessions or forcing detainees to denounce other individuals. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment visited Turkey in November 2016 and found that torture was widespread following the failed coup, particularly at the time of arrest and subsequent detention. He further found that the number of investigations reportedly carried out into allegations of torture was grossly disproportionate to allegations of frequencies of violations. Human Rights Watch estimates that between October 2016 and October 2017, over 150,000 people passed through the police custody. At the same time, there were serious interferences, dismissals of judges, investigators, prosecutors, and other state officials, weakening protection and often replacing partying ones with people not trained on torture prevention. As for the prison population in 2012, Turkey's prison population was 136,000. It doubled in 2018 up to 268,000. And in 2020, reportedly, it was nearly 290,000, and some 90,000 were freed as a result of rather discriminatory early release law adopted in the framework of measures against COVID-19. Discriminatory because this early release law did not cover any of the so-called political prisoners, and those human rights defenders and human rights activists remained in custody. The wide use of hate speech and propaganda, demonizing of political opponents, as well as minority groups, mainly Kurds, created an atmosphere where, for example, torture against Kurds is seen as something normal in large groups of society. Some lawyers that work with the victims of torture of Kurdish origin, especially those who were in insurgency, are not even complaining of experienced torture because they also consider it to be something that should be expected if you are taken into police or military custody. With the atmosphere of fear, the official numbers of torture complaints also do not reflect the reality. In circumstances of non-functioning national preventive mechanism that published its prison visit after 4 years only, which was virtually amorphous and useless, it's difficult to talk about institutional protection also. So it's fair to say that the institutional safeguards are only made for the purpose of the fulfilling some recommendations from internationals, and also on verbal level to demonstrate commitment. In reality, neither the NPM nor the National Inquiry Commission for the State of Emergency Measures or Human Rights and Equality Institute of Turkey look into the problematic issues of torture, discrimination, or non-compliance of the emergency decrees with human rights standards and our constitution. The other important issue is ever-existing impunity in Turkey that has certainly increased to menacing levels since 2016, when state of emergency was declared as a consequence of 31 emergency decree laws were adopted. Each of them had limited certain provision of constitutional and human rights standards. Some decrees and laws provide carte blanche for impunity, like the decree number 667 and laws 2937 and 6722. The provisions of decree 667 imply that all members of security forces and police cannot be held accountable for their actions while on active duty and performing special operations. What else do you want to see as impunity and carte blanche for impunity? The fact that emergency decrees are still enforced some 2.5 years after the state of emergency was lifted leaves no space for illusions or optimism in relation to the current political leadership of Turkey. Armed conflict in Southeast is still ongoing, and the individual torture-related complaints are met with populistic statements, and no criminal cases have been initiated against any perpetrator. It is worth mentioning that not only torture is widespread, there are immunity clauses and also immunity clauses and practice for perpetrators are in place, but the right to defense is also endangered due to threats to human rights defenders, criminalization of human rights defenders, threats to lawyers in sensitive cases, the destruction of independent media and marginalization of opponents critics made the power in the country an absolute one, and no alternative opinion is tolerated. The civil society space has been shrinking for a long time, and now the independent civil society organizations feel more threatened than ever before, only because they want to carry on with their work and, among other tasks, provide support to torture victims. Perpetrators have no fear and openly act despite the famous zero tolerance policy towards torture declared back in 2003. As one of the scholars, when I was preparing for this intervention, was rightly saying that all the policies of zero problem or zero tolerance have failed with the current government, including the one of zero problems with the neighbors, where there are zero neighbors without problems in Turkey. And the same goes for the zero tolerance policy towards torture, where there is absolutely clear evidence that it's also a failure. The response from EU or international community involved was shamefully insufficient given the magnitude of the violence and suffering, as well as the numbers of victims. No any other authoritarian regime has enjoyed such a cozy and comfortable indifference encouraging further crackdown. Despite all the existing leverages at its disposal, the EU is clearly acting not in line with its declared values. And OMCT on the 26th of June came up with 10 points for resetting torture agenda in Turkey. And I will quickly read through those 10 points, and we'll send the full text of my intervention to the organizers. So first of all, combating impunity is the litmus test for any anti-torture strategy. Recommit to the fight against torture, recognize victims, whether their affiliation, and eliminate incentives for torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Guarantee an independent, full, and prompt investigation and documentation of torture cases in accordance with the UN Convention Against Torture and the Istanbul Protocol. Ensure an effective prevention of torture through strengthened procedural guarantees and rebuild and independent judiciary as protector of rights. Create the space, protect victims, family members, and witnesses against any form of reprisals, and secure the right to defend from torture by anti-torture actors. Learning the COVID-19 lessons, prevent overcrowding in the detention on a lasting basis, and ensure humane conditions in accordance with the UN Mandela rules. Refrain from prolonged police custody and delayed registration of the arrest, and ensure immediate access to lawyers. Guarantee the right to health care, access to doctor, and provide holistic rehabilitation services to the victims of torture and ill treatment with victim-centered approach. Review the practice of confession-based investigation and conduct a justice sector reform that ensures that no information is obtained by torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment can infect legal procedures. Transparency beats secrecy. Secure, viable, and systematic monitoring of the places of deprivation of liberty with inclusion of civil society. Guarantee a specific space for functioning of civil society free of persecutions and repressions. And last, uphold the principle of democratic society on plurality and diversity, and protect those vulnerable to torture, including refraining from hate speech against national, religious, and sexual minorities and vulnerable groups. That's, I think, the last but not the least, because the hate speech, unfortunately, in Turkey was clearly instigating torture, and unfortunately it was made on the highest political level. Thanks a lot for your attention, and sorry for a very quick talk today. Thank you.
Thank you. You were talking quick because you had a lot to say. That's the best we can have. And it was a very systematic exposure what we should do. I would like, meanwhile, also to respond to some questions that we had, and a bit linked to what Mushegh said. So some participants say, yeah, but you should understand the very difficult situation Turkey is in. There is an armed conflict, there are refugees from Syria coming in, there was a failed coup d'etat. Europe, the European Union, first saying you can enter, you cannot enter. And also noting that some EU countries like United Kingdom, for instance, were taking emergency measures also when they had the IRA. So are we not saying too much negative about that? Should we not more understand? Should the European Union not open its arms to let Turkey in? Briefly, is that the question? But I think as answering this, we cannot ignore that there is a difficult situation, of course. That's not what we say. But even in a difficult situation, it is clear that some things are clearly not allowed, and if they happen, should be punished. It's not because you have a difficult situation that you can systematically allow or even push torture by the words the government said and by the fact nothing is punished afterwards. So I think indeed that discussion between the European Union and Turkey is a bit hypocrite sometimes. It's like a chicken and egg, who started first, and the negotiation did not go well, and then there was a reason why not to do it, and again. So it is some hypocrisy in the relationship between European Union and Turkey, I admit that. But all these problems that there are not taken as an excuse what's happening. And we see often in the responses of the Turkish government towards the international reports that it said, but you forget that we have terrorists, you forget that we have the failed coup d'etat. We do not forget. But it is not an excuse to do what is happening now. And a lot of people already said, institutions said, that the definition of terrorism is so broad also that someone who's opposing to the system, to the governing majority, is nearly always seen as a terrorist by itself. So I think we are not taking out of our mind the difficulties that are there, but it's not an excuse for happening. There is a second question that's about universal jurisdiction. Can in European countries something be done against the perpetrators of torture? That's and Mushegh will know that has been in European legislations for some periods a stronger tendency towards universal jurisdiction, and so that national judiciary could judge perpetrators of gross violations, even if they were not present in the country, and even if the victim was not necessarily from the nationality of that country. All the countries have restricted it, and we saw at the first moment that it was openly very widely and caused a lot of problems, and now it has been closed. I think indeed, and on universal jurisdiction, the criteria now are too strict, and of course, that is a little bit, that's compensated by the fact we had the international penal jurisdiction, the court, international court, penal court. Turkey is not a member of it, as far as I know. They are not submitted to the jurisdiction of that court. That could help, but it is not. So the only thing we could have is universal jurisdiction, and that universal jurisdiction is not strong enough. I believe we should try to, in the different national parliaments, to act that there is some possibility that these perpetrators could not go unpunished. We are criticizing the impunity in Turkey, but we should also criticize the impunity that we have installed in our own countries actually against that. So this, as far as the questions are concerned, Erhan is not able to enter. There is some problem. He can join us, but he cannot come on the microphone and so it's very sad about that. Lucky we had his brave testimony on video. I was just checking if still the questions are coming in so that we try to answer them all. I'm just checking now. No, someone say thank you for answering my question. You're welcome. That's why we have the webinar. And so if there is no sudden questions coming in anymore, I would by this then try to close the webinar. Not without saying that we still have, there is an effective tool to condemn torture in Turkey, says someone, in United Kingdom. I think that the United Kingdom has this Global Human Rights Sanctions Act. If, I don't know if there is universal jurisdiction, but thanks for the suggestion. The Magnitsky Act, we know about that, about the universal jurisdiction. I have to check if that's possible or not. Anyhow, this was the first webinar on torture. We have a second one on impunity that is organized. As you know, we have already the report of impunity is on our website. And this other webinar on impunity will be held on 16th of December. Everyone is welcome. Everyone who subscribed, we are about 100 people for this webinar. Just between 90 and 100. That's a very nice figure for us. We are very happy with that. We try to promote the fact that we're organizing this tribunal, but meanwhile through the webinars, through interviews, personal interviews we give, to keep everything that we do and that other activists and other organizations do keep it alive. Our motto is simple, because silence is the most important enemy of human rights, and so that's why we do want to keep silent. I wish you a very happy and fructuous day, a healthy day in this period of pandemic situation, and I wish you all the good luck and thank you for joining us for this webinar.